So this is special for me for a few reasons. One is I've been following your career for quite some time, since 2000, I think it was 15 when you were in sixth grade and you launched 1,000 Black Girl Books to collect
Hmm.
1,000 books, which we're going to talk about.
Uh-huh.
And also, you were named after Bob Marley.
Yes, yes, I was.
So I actually just got into Bob Marley, his music, but also who he was as a person. I would say in the last 3 years or so, I love to do deep dives on people's biographies and learn from quote unquote greats. And I have been studying him. So I was really excited to know if your parents also loved him or why they named you after him.
Yeah, so I am Jamaican. I'm first generation on my mom's side. She was born and raised in Retreat, St. Mary, Jamaica, which is like a super rural area. And she grew up with her cousins, and her brothers, and actually didn't get to live with her mom, who is living in the US and Canada and working, was raised by her grandmother in Jamaica. So when it came to my name and having a kid, she wanted to make sure that there was still like I was going to be an American, but she wanted to have some sort of cultural imprint as like that Jamaican stamp on my name. And it's great because when I like go to a Jamaican restaurant or I'm in Jamaica or basically anywhere, it's always a great way to like meet or connect or always know someone. So I'm really happy that they did that because I think it speaks Bob Marley and getting to visit the Bob Marley Museum on some of the trips that I've done, like with 1,000 Black Girl Books. I mean, he has a spirit of liberation and of Black liberation and of pride for that country, which I'm so proud of. So it is like it was a great idea for my mom's part. I have to give her credit.
I think so too. And also,
Yeah.
his music and his life in many ways was just about unity among people. And that feels very much like your messaging also.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what Bob Marley has stood for Jamaicans is sort of the understanding that a small peoples and people who come from worlds that are often unimaginable to Americans or to other cultures are still full of that strength and that pride. And my mom is very proud of the fact that Jamaica doesn't have red, white, or blue. And it's one of the only country in the world that doesn't have red, white, or blue in its flag. And that we are a small and strong, powerful people that can spread that love and build that unity that you were talking about. So it is super important to me. And One Love is a Black Girl book that we've gotten to donate a lot by the Marley family, which is a great book.
Speaking of 1,000 Black Girl Books, so you're in sixth grade and you decide to collect 1,000 books with Black women protagonists,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to donate them for Black girls at other schools. How does a sixth grader think about this?
I think that a sixth grader thinks about this when they have a parent and a network that will support them to dig into these ideas further. So when it comes to like the beginning of 1,000 Black Girl Books, I did not think that I could collect 1,000 books. It was a big goal. It was not something that I felt equipped to do, but I think my mom really centered the idea that giving back is a practice and it's something that we have to do. And when we notice problems and we investigate those problems and we realize that they impact not just us but our community at large and are a result of things that are out of our control, so can only be fixed by collectives, by people coming together. It's important to say something, and I have obviously can express that now sort of with an 18-year-old like vocabulary. But I think at the time the idea is that if you see something, you say something. And if you have the power to do something, you are hurting people in your silence, because there are so many people in my classroom that have less access to books and to these stories than I do. So for me to be silent in this moment is for me to deny them the opportunity to see themselves in these stories, even though, I may be able to go to Barnes and Noble and pick them up myself. So I think having someone like that who will push a parent, who will push you forwards, or a caregiver in any role, that can investigate your feelings and understand that children have big feelings that can be turned into beautiful and big, amazing things. And it takes the right questions, it takes the right investment. But my goal is to share that and make those conversations more accessible to educators and to parents.
When I was watching a bunch of interviews that you did early on, like CBS This Morning and
Mm-hmm.
like all these big spots that you were at, and they kept asking you about your confidence. They kept saying, like, you're so confident. What is it? And the question kind of annoyed me a little bit. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think it's fair. I mean, what I do is surprising. I think that it is surprising, but the goal is that my existence and my confidence and whatever makes my like work a phenomenon, I want it to be a norm one day. I want it to be that girls feel open and honest and accepting of wanting to create and build these communities and build solutions. So yes, I've had many interviews where I've been like they think I'm just so like precocious or like a phenomenon or like whatever. But it also is important to hopefully speak to the idea that I can maybe change their perceptions of how kids can talk and think about racism and sexism and all these issues. So it's like good and bad. But the question, I know what you mean, like being the youngest in the room has definitely been a very different perspective, I think, on the activist world and on the media world, I think I would say.
Do you think that kids are really thinking about these big questions and just not talking about it as much?
So I think that it's the idea, like I think that there's a disconnect. So it's like kids identify these problems, but what leads to the sort of insecurity that I think a lot of people put on Gen Z is like, oh, they care so much about what other people think. They're so like obsessed with social media. And I agree with that to a certain extent. Social media is addicting. We know that it's affecting our generation more than others. But at the same time, like a lot of that is coming from deeply rooted like ideologies around race, around sex that are problematic and that are wrong, that exist in like American culture and within our society. So, the idea that black women and girls are louder, over sexualized, are able to, act and work as adults at younger ages than kids of other races and identities. Like these ideas exist and are only accessible to people that have the education and the background to know that they are deep-rooted problems. And what I hope to do is to teach parents to show kids that there's an undercurrent to the way that our world exists. And that by you being a beautiful, strong, confident person in whatever your identity might be, you need to know these myths so that you can act and live in a world where you can upstand and like actively bust these myths, like actively dispel these ideas. Because when you don't give kids the words to know what's happening and to understand their history and to understand the world, they'll never have the voice to want to take things further. So I think it's about adults taking and giving that support to help kids get to that next step.
Do you find that adults are receptive to your thoughts and opinions?
I think that they are receptive to my thoughts and opinions, but I do have this issue that I've talked about as well on social media, but maybe years ago, about like respectability politics within that. So I think that a lot of adults are receptive to what I say because I'm super well spoken and I come to these events very well dressed, very prepared. I love this. This is what I do. This is my passion. And they can see that. But I think that if my ideas are presented by someone who looks differently or talks differently than me, I think that sometimes adults may not actually be as receptive in practice. And that's what I'm actively trying to sort of dispel in my work, is that I want to capture and make sure that like queer Black girls and girls of all identities, and however someone wants to present and say, hey, I have a problem, I want to organize, I want to build community. It shouldn't matter if you're wearing a blazer or not wearing a blazer, or, things like that oftentimes can be the gatekeeping. Like, to think about my success, I have to recognize that I'm thin, that I don't have like the coiliest textures of hair, that I have like privileges and access within the role that the public figure sort of role that I've been able to step into. And I really encourage adults to not think so much about the package with which these ideas are being presented, because that's kind of what we're trying to dispel. It's like, we don't want these stereotypes to make you think that, oh, this person's idea is good or this person's idea is not good. So it's a balance, but I try to go through all of it. I give them all the tips. Like, I keep it very real I think, when I talk to older generations, because it's super important to engage in these types of dialogues.
I want to talk about books with you for a little bit, because books changed my life. I know they changed your life too. How did reading touch you? And like, do you remember the book that kind of got you hooked?
Well, I just remember the experience and the ritual of reading with my parents and being read to every night. And I think about how much that helped me for mental health reasons, in the relationship with my family, in the words I learned and the stories I had, that like all of the books of my childhood. I mean, there are some, like there's like Please Baby Please by Spike Lee and his wife. I love that book. And I remember my parents reading that book to me. Everyone has these sort of common themes of what we go through in life. And it's really important to read stories that allow us to appreciate the people and where they come from, and also to learn about and preserve our histories, so we can step into and move about our lives with a freedom and a curiosity that I always encourage. And I think, especially within my generation, because we have access to so much information, we have to be curious. We have to keep reading. We have to keep vetting. And I think that books give you that power and that freedom. So reading with my parents as a kid has sort of just grown into the curiosity and zest for the world that you need to do this change making work. But it was really like, it's just always been such a meditative and important moment for me.
Me too. When I feel like I lack inspiration or I'm burnt out, I like to read like another woman's story, another person like Bob Marley's, right? But like particularly women for me, and I get sort of reinvigorated, or my creative juices start flowing. Is there a story that you've read, a memoir, a biography that kind of plays in your head?
That's a really good question. I think one that plays in my head the most, I would say, is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otesha Moshfegh. I love that book. It's not a Black girl book, but I think that for me, it has touched on like the ideas of being burnt out and how to handle exhaustion and like work culture in the 21st century. And as I've like stepped into adulthood and really had like I've done well, but I've had a difficult time sort of balancing and like just being an adult. Like it's hard. I mean, it's supposed to be hard for everyone. So having like that story, I always kind of have that story in the back of my mind of like my relationship to work and to exhaustion and to sleep and making sure that I can fuel myself to then be able to help and fuel other people.
Your work started with 1000 Black girl books. And since then, you've written so many pieces in Rolling Stone, in Elle, all having to do with your activism. A lot of it is a fight for racial justice. I have a very blunt question for you.
Mm-hmm.
For all of the people listening who are not women of color, what do you think we are missing about the Black female experience? What do people not get?
That's a good question. I think that the fundamental thing that I think might be the challenge in the way we understand Black women is that we as a country in the United States do not recognize that the impact that enslavement had, let alone the idea that the entire United States economy and world was built on enslavement, and that Black women were the people who birthed all of those babies in all of those communities and had to be the creators in such a terrible time of oppression. Like they truly built and allowed this world to exist and reaped none of the social, political, ethical, or moral benefits of it. And as a country, I do not think we have done enough work to let people fully understand and realize how different the world would be without enslavement across the board. We are so severely undereducated, and I'm so lucky to be here just now getting that education. But there are millions of Americans who are in many ways not blissfully unaware, because they're suffering sort of unrelated consequences of what happened in enslavement, of how we've developed these systems. They're being failed by their political offices, and they don't understand that Black women were the people that have faced these challenges from the forefront. And once we heal from the bottom up, we will all reap the benefits of healing Black women's livelihoods, because we need to be thankful to them for it. And that's something that, that is a good question, because I haven't really talked about that much, but I think that that's something that I'm discovering here, is that when we don't think about and recognize and choose to now ban elements of American history, we are losing so much of the personhood, such little personhood already granted to Black women and to Black women and girls.
I know you've been really vocal about book banning. I also feel very passionate, not just because I'm a book lover, but my extended family was in the Holocaust, and there's a huge history of book banning, obviously, in Hitler Germany. So tell me from your perspective, why this is so urgent and crucial that we fight this.
Well, I think this issue is first a civil rights issue. It's an issue that I feel like I try to speak on as much as I can, but I still feel very, unprepared, because I'm a part of the generation that is, experiencing it. But in the simplest terms, you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So when we limit access, when we don't give kids the opportunities to ask questions, when we don't give them the truth of the way that our world exists, they will not be able to first have the hope to look for change and to understand social movements, that when we don't talk about Black Panthers, when we don't talk about gay rights activists, when we don't talk about women's liberation activists, this next generation of change makers that we need in Gen Z for climate issues, for so many things happening in the world, won't exist if they don't know the people who came before them and have done it. Because there are so many young people right now who are looking out into the world and saying, I can't find any stories in my school about Black people that have done great things in this country, about queer people that have done amazing things in this country, about disabled people that have done amazing things in this country. And when we take away those experiences and we take away the stories of how they've been disenfranchised and actively hurt in this country, we lose so much of the hope that we actually so urgently need to push us forward in these issues that are not even related to what I care about, like the climate and the planet. So I speak on books and education, but I need change makers in all of these areas. I need people to be able to know these histories and to know these stories so that we can build coalitions, that I'm on a podcast like this with 5 other people and we're in a collective together where we do and work on these issues intersectionally, that when we erase these histories, we are losing the future generation of leaders that we need. Yeah. And they also won't be able to serve the adults that will, like the current adults, like people that are, you're the generation above me, my parents, anyone like that. When we don't have access to the histories of what happened in older generations, you guys will never be able to trust and understand Gen Z, because we were miseducated and you were educated differently than us. So we also haven't considered what would happen 30 years from now when all of Gen Z when it's book bans, and it's been a book banned world, and Gen Z is doctors, lawyers, president, Congress, and they don't know what year the Emancipation Proclamation happened. We don't think about the logistical and sort of cultural worldwide impacts that book banning would have. And even though I usually would speak to the racial identities of that and what representation means, I think that on a very simple political basis, do we want millions of uneducated young people who will then never feel trusted by the older generations because they don't know the history to build that better world? It's as simple as that.
Like books and college, they don't teach you what to think, they teach you how to think. And so that critical thinking skill, to lose that is very truly dangerous.
Truly dangerous. Because if you think the way that people drive and act and talk to you at the DMV is weird now, if you think that people are weird now, like wait until you see a fully uneducated world. Like you are not, none of us want that. We think we might right now, but I promise you we don't want that.
The DMV is already weird.
Yes, like everything's already bad. Like it can't get weirder.
Okay, so this is totally like a left field question because it's not about books and it's not about activism, but I value your experiences so much, and you're so great at sharing them in a way that feels digestible. Talk to me about being part of Gen Z. I think that I read all these statistics about such unhappiness, such discomfort, highest rates of mental illness. What do you think millennials, boomers, what do you think we're all not understanding about where you guys are at? What's the discrepancy?
I think that, I don't know. I think that it's really hard to know, but the discrepancy I think is maybe just that the world it's become so modern so fast. And I think that Gen Z agrees with older generations in the idea that things are changing really quickly. Like AI is new to me too. Like AI is, this world that we're living in is changing.
Do you feel any of it? Like, do you look at social, if you're being like really honest, do you look at social media and feel badly? Do you?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think that I have, yes. The first part of your question is like the unhappiness, and speaking to the way that Gen Z feels, I definitely experience that. And I should make that very clear because that is something that I struggle with. If I would say my number one, like, source of where my mental health sort of stresses come from, I would say it's feeling hopeless, feeling anxious, feeling concerned about the future, feeling worried. It is something that I get really stressed about. And I actually avoided watching Interstellar for a really long time. And then I watched Interstellar this past winter and it's still stuck in my head. like the idea that that movie was made 10 years ago talking about the planet and the dangers of the planet, and then you watch it now and it's like, you know, you think more about sort of these issues. So
Yeah.
I get super, super anxious, and already having like anxiety as like a condition that I deal with. I think the more educated I've been getting at Harvard about the world and sort of sometimes seeing the bad side of Harvard too, that adds to my anxiety. This is a new place for me. This has been such a different experience than going to a public high school, and I love it, but it's tough. So, like you said, I think that Gen Z does experience the statistics. That information is very real. And those numbers are worse than I think. I would say that they're worse in reality than oftentimes what they're projected to be. But I think that at the bottom of this, and the bottom of the issue of mental health in this country, particularly for younger generations, would also benefit older generations in free healthcare and access to free therapy.
For sure.
That the destigmatization of mental health is a really important thing. But I guess like in regards to the discrepancy,
More than that,
I know that there's a lot of stigma that older generations hold around conversations around mental health and around a lot of these things that I think can create that sort of disconnect, where a lot of Gen Z kids don't feel comfortable talking to their parents about things because their parents oftentimes don't have the digital literacy to necessarily understand the implications of how what's happening on their phone is making them feel. That they can't sometimes understand how like a group chat would make you cry and lock yourself in your room for a day. That's happened to me, like where a screenshot or a post or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that those things are good things, but they're real feelings. And because there's such generational gaps in sort of the understandings of mental health and the perspectives on them, which is fair and is natural.
I have a theory. I think it is a sense of hopelessness. And I think you sort of touched on that by saying like you feel nervous about the future. I think hope is a really powerful emotion. I know
Yeah.
that when I have been at my saddest moments, the idea, like for instance, if I'm going through a bad breakup, the only thing that like pulls me out of the sadness is the glimmer of like who I might meet next. Right? It's that sense of hope that something will get better, that your life is always on a forward trajectory. And I think there feels like a lack of hope.
It feels like I agree. I feel like for me, sometimes I feel like it is interesting to think about a generation that is now aware of the idea that the world might end or the planet might be harmed in any way. Like I've been thinking about and sort of like fixating on that topic of like, how is Gen Z different? Because Gen Z, I think, might be one of I mean, there's different generations and catastrophic events in every generation, but I don't think there's ever been a generation where kids like as young as 5 and 10 are conceiving of the idea that their planet might not exist. And like when you don't have that security and that hope, like you're talking about, it's hard to construct the idea of like, I want to work towards a family, or I want to work towards this job, or I want to work towards going to this school, or I want to work towards all these things. And Gen Z then brings out and creates beautiful projects because they don't want to do those things, but can at the same time feel really hopeless and afraid because it's hard to imagine, like it is hard to think about what this world might look like 70 years now. And the fact that I would be living in it and still doing the work that I do, because we don't know what's going to happen, but we have to stay hopeful and we have to keep ourselves informed to gain that hope.
You were an editor in residence at Elle, and
yes,
I heard you saying that you wanted to cover the experiences of girls, which I feel very connected to. And this in many ways was like the summer of girlhood, with Taylor, Beyonce, the Barbie movie.
Yeah.
Or like even, have you heard of Girl Dinner on
yes.
TV? You know, like
yes,
we've all just been talking about girlhood, I think more than we have before. And I started thinking about how we don't really talk about boyhood. And I think it's because society just like lets men continue their childlike behavior, and women have to grow out of being a child very quickly. And I wanted to ask you in particular, because you really did grow out of being a child very quickly, what your relationship is like to girl Marley, to your little kid.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely, I feel like I feel like maybe 6 months ago I started to not feel like a girl. Like it's only I think as much as I have had to grow up,
Yeah.
And I do feel very mature and I get it a lot. So like I know it's real. Like I like to downplay the fact that I might come off as like more independent or more, mature, but I definitely do. But inside of me, like I am so goofy and I am so not serious about anything. Like I do think that I've stepped away from girlhood and because I've been able to develop more emotional control. And that's one thing I've noticed that now, like I kind of feel more tapped into my purpose at all times. And I feel like I'm doing things for myself. And because I recognize the value I have within, and I don't think I had that as a girl. So when I think about girl Marley, as like goofy and awesome as she needed to love herself more. And I'm just now getting to the place where I can at least like even say that, let alone I'm not even practicing it perfectly, but practice it at times.
Yeah.
So girlhood was like, it definitely was very mature and very fast paced compared to other kids, but that's my life. You only get one life. And I try to I keep it so light. Like it's one of those things where I think people are genuinely shocked at like how not, it's like nonchalant I can be about things at times.
I completely believe it. You did some really great interviews when you did your editor in residence. You interviewed
Thank you.
Misty Copeland, Ava DuVernay, Hillary Clinton, which I have to tell you, I'm incredibly envious. She is I am dying to interview her. So I want to live through you for a second. I don't know if you feel this way. When I interview people, I leave the interview, and part of the reason I love it is I feel like I get to live better through their stories. And I kind of take a piece of them with me.
Mm.
I want to know what you took from each of those interviews. If you can, I know it was a little bit ago.
Yeah, no, I think from each of those interviews, I would say my Ava DuVernay interview, I was so scared. That is still one of the scariest, most intimidating things I've ever done because first I was so young and she has this beautiful, like husky, strong voice and she's so smart. And I had to actually prepare. Like, I just remember like scrolling on my laptop, like just trying to figure out everything I could about her. But there were some things I just didn't understand and couldn't get at the time. So I was so nervous and I was like 13 or 12 or so that was like really hard. And I think what that I took away is that like your confidence matters and your confidence will benefit you. Because like during and in between takes of the interview, she was definitely pushing me to like be more assertive in what I was saying and to be more like of myself, because obviously she had to see videos and like have heard of my work to be interested. And I think that interview, she just encouraged me to like be the girl that is what's making you like great, like by you being yourself, that's what makes this special. So just do that. And I asked her great questions. It was a great conversation. It was the hottest day in New Orleans of my whole life. And I would never.
Hot in New Orleans is a different kind of.
Exactly. I was sweat. Like I imagine, see like the energy, you can see how scary it must have been. Like this is such a big moment for me. And the Misty Copeland interview, I would say, I think that I had taken from her story, I had just taken like so much away in strength, because I think that people don't know, and many girls and young girls of color know how harsh the dance world is, but I don't think people actually consider how difficult mentally and physically what she's accomplished is, and to do it in a space that is so still not accessible to the community that celebrates you, and to still like do it for white audiences and not always get to make Black art. There's a lot there, and there's a lot to talk about in like what it means to be a ballerina and a dancer and a performer. And I think our conversation and everything that she's done as an author as well outside of her career has really been pushing towards a world where we think about how Black girls are treated in these spaces. And I respect her and admire her so much for that. And Secretary Clinton, I would say, is someone that I'm still in like good like relationship and communication with. She keeps up with me. She sends like really sweet notes, and she's a person that there's just, what can you not learn from? I mean, I have grown and I'm older now, so I have my own, personal feelings and perspectives about her career and her life, and I, hold my own on how I view history and view the world. But there is something really valuable in having a person who was the first and having conversations with people that are first, because we learn so much from them and learn so much from their stories, that she's seen and been in rooms that literally no other person in the history of time has had access to. And there's something very valuable in that for all of us. So like, I'm so grateful for people, well, those people in the conversations I had with those women, but also Maddie Kahn and the team at Elle, who you obviously interviewed Maddie and you know she's amazing. And I just did a book event with her in Boston last week. Like, people that open the doors for kids and allow kids to be great are doing the work just by allowing me to be in the space with them. And I've just learned so much from the people that say yes and the people that open those doors.
Okay, I do rapid fire.
Okay.
So,
I'm nervous.
No.
I'm just kidding.
Don't be nervous at all. Okay, everyone always gets the question they're meant to. So you let me know when to stop.
Stop.
Ooh, okay. One thing you're trying to or need to let go of.
Shopping. I hate seeing a job. Like, I have to take my life more serious. I need to stop shopping online so much.
Where do you shop? Like on Amazon?
Like, it's just Amazon. Like, with this dorm, it's like anytime you miss something or you're like, oh, I need batteries, I need hand towels, I need paper towels, I need whatever. It's like all of a sudden you got an Amazon package that's like this big at your delivery door and you're so embarrassed. It was me this morning. It was so embarrassing. So I have to stop shopping.
And I feel like, I don't know what the word is, like ecologically, I feel so bad.
It's not right. And it's Amazon's fault because they will sometimes like put it'll be the tiniest little thing in the biggest box you can imagine. But still, like, shopping, I think I need to, like, consumption just doesn't make you feel good. It doesn't even make you feel all that better. So I have to.
Have you read Essentialism?
No, I haven't. Should I?
Okay, I'm going to send it to you.
Okay.
You don't have to read the whole book. You have to read like the first 3 chapters.
Okay. I'll read it.
Okay, what is a book that has changed your life? Something you think everybody should read?
I think everybody should read Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. That is a book that I recommend a lot. Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson is a really great story for kids, but I think that Red at the Bone really speaks to issues of like class, race, sexuality, religion, and it's in such authentic and real life scenarios that each of us face. Like, she really taps into the core of humanity in such a way that I think can really move people, because people are like, birth and death and life is just like, we are all so affected by what it means to lose and to gain access to what we want in our lives. And she just writes in such a beautiful way. Like, I could talk about it for way too long. I also think that The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, it's a book about a soldier in the Vietnam War and like his like the group that he was with and the experiences that they had there. I think is a interesting look into American history, and I think what makes people more curious about history. So it's a book that I would recommend because it's really important to learn about and to think about our world from a perspective that we so often have such limited access to. And to hear stories like that can really move everybody, I feel, in such a universal way.
What is a phrase that your mom said to you that you will pass on to potentially your future children one day?
First one I'd say is have fun. She says have fun. Anytime I do anything, she's like, literally just have fun. Like, she would say it maybe 10 million times a day. But I think the true advice that she gives me that has always stuck with me is to do your best and not worry about being the best. Because it's a good one. She actually ate that one. I'm not gonna lie. She did a good job. She did. She just really tries to not get me wrapped up in competition or in comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy, is sort of like what's at the basis of that. But, you know, she made it for kids and made it for me. So I try to always keep that in my head, because I still feel a lot of like imposter syndrome at times, as all people, you know, do every once in a while. And it's just important to realize that it's not about a title and that you are an asset to others. Like, not sometimes people need like you don't always need things or need a label to feel good about something. That your existence and should be enough, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in so many material things, especially because the world is just so like digital and buy and
Amazon,
so in your face. Yeah, it's so in your face. Like, exactly,
the world is so like, Amazon.
Yeah, it's just like, it's so in your face that at times it's just really important to remember that my joy and my individual happiness and my effort is the basis of what makes my life important. Like not anything else, like not my school, not anything. Like you are not defined by those things in any way.
What is the smartest decision you've ever made?
Smartest decision I've ever made was anytime I've decided to take a break, anytime I've decided to just relax and to make sure that I feel good before doing something. That's always the best decision I can make.
That's awesome. Thank you, Marley.
Thank you.